Hello, everybody. Happy International Human Rights Day. My name is Ona Ramzi. I'm the director of Mongol Identity. And today we have a fantastic guest speaker and our and also Mongol Identity member. We are really excited about this interview to find out what it's like to experience the word Mongol in Canada, in Quebec, in Montreal. So we look forward to finding out more. Atta, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Happy International Human Rights Day, and we hope you're having a great day today. I would like to introduce Jérémy Le Blanc-Gauthier, and he is a PhD candidate at the Institute of Religious Studies at the University of Montreal, where he is currently working on the religious concept of kamikaze in relation to the Mongolian invasions of the Japanese islands. He is also interested in Mongolian Buddhism, as well as paradigmatic representation of Mongolian history. He previously completed a dissertation on the history of otherness in Shinto. Recently, about 2 months ago, in September 2021, he published an article in English language, in French. In English language, it means now is the time to focus on the Mongols, recognizing the heuristic potential of Mongolian studies. So we welcome Jérémy. Thank you so much for joining us today from Montreal.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. So I hear that you're studying Mongolian language. Is that right? Senbeno.
Senbeno. Yeah, I did study Mongol language. I started a few months ago to improve my capacity to read Mongol authors, because I try to recenter my specialty from Japanese studies to Mongol studies. So obviously I need to know about the Mongol language to reach the Mongol authors, but also the Mongol source, the text from the past.
Fantastic. Probably tell us more about Mongols than actually we know about the history of Buddhism. So it's really interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about your own, what do you study and what your current position is at the moment, and what actually drew your attention to this kind of Mongol and Japanese Buddhism and studies?
Well, I always been interested in the whole of Asia, and as most of the students in the Western world, the first contact with Asia is usually Japan, because Japan is everywhere in manga and anime, and it took so much space of the public space and public culture that everybody doesn't know Asia through Japan. But once you're on the topic of East Asian study, you learn more about other culture, other country, and you come to realize that Japan cannot explain everything about Buddhism or even Asia. So the more you know, the more you have to step away from Japan and get interested in more. And I came to the conclusion from my part that what I need to learn about Buddhists was mostly owed by the Galuk, and more precisely by the Buddhism in Mongolia, mainly the presence of the gods, because Japanese did diffuse an idea of the Buddhism that the gods were not present or not that much important in the system. And the more I read about Buddhism, the more I came to the conclusion that the gods are either central to the system or at least really important in the Buddhist system. And what system did put the gods in first line is, in my opinion, the Mongol, with, for example, the Tsam dance, where the god are actually been enacted in the public. So in the Mongol Buddhism, people are actually always in contact with their gods, or at least with representation of the gods. While in Japanese Buddhism, they tend to shift away from the gods. Those are overgeneralization, but I think there's some truth in that. And that drew me toward the Mongolian Buddhism. But actually, the first thing that caught my attention in the Mongols were a girl named Batitsek Soronzabold. She won the bronze medal in the 2012 Olympics by defeating a Canadian. So a lot of wrestlers in Canada seen a Canadian being severely beat by a Mongol. And it was actually the first time that I take attention in Mongolia. So my presence here is a lot due to her winning the bronze medal in the Olympic.
That's an awesome story that an Olympian drew attention to Mongolian studies, you know?
Exactly. She's my first real contact with Mongolia. So Batut Sextonzabol winning the bronze medal in the Olympic. But after that, for sure, I get more invested in books and in Buddhism, and I learned much more about Mongolia. But yeah, my first contact with nowadays Mongolia has been through the Batut Sextonzabol.
Wow, that's amazing. See, role models play huge roles, you know, in the world stage. You know, that's amazing. That's great. Yes, thank you. So I hear that you are using the word Mongol very nicely and confidently in the right context. But we hear that in Montreal, in Quebec, in Canada, and also in French-speaking culture and language, that the word Mongol is misused in different contexts. And now Mongol identity is aware, our organization is aware of the history of the word Mongol, how it came about to be misused in the Western context and internationally. So we were wondering, how did you come across this word Mongol misused the first time or in your life experience, and how does it make you feel?
My first time I encountered the word Mongol misused, I couldn't remember because it's so normalized in the French language that it became a daily words as an insult or as to mean something idiotic or violent or too much chaotic. So I couldn't even know when it was the first time I encountered the words. It's been taught to me as a normal words. The first time I noticed that it shocked. It was in 2015, if I recall. Some people at radio use it to insult other people, another city actually, Quebec City inhabitants, Montreal people at the radio were insulting Quebec City inhabitants. And it's been an association defending people with mental handicap that spoke out and said we shouldn't associate people with handicap to Mongol. And I remember that I recall what is bad being Mongol in the end. I mean, Mongol are not bad people, so there's nothing that's devalorizing people about being Mongol. And I just leave it there for a few years, but the same topic came back 2 years ago. A comedian on stage used it in the same way, and the same associations spoke out again and said that we shouldn't associate handicapped people with Mongol. And once again, I told myself, that's not the problem. The problem is we assume that the word Mongol means something bad, because if we understand the real meaning of the words, that is actually a nation, peoples, and a civilization, nobody would be ashamed being called Mongols, because it's actually something grand, something meaningful, something strong. So the problem is not that we use the words to identify handicapped people. The problem is we use an understanding of the words that is so lesser than the words means. That will be my understanding of the words. But here in French, it's actually a daily words. I hear the words used as an insult almost every day. And we don't even understand that it's supposed to designate people. And when you recall people that is actually designating people, they don't initially get it. I've got an example. Someone told me about someone else that had bad writing skill. And he told me that man is as illiterate as a Mongol. I have to recall him that Mongol are actually a country with one of the best alphabetization score in the world. So what he say is meaningless. I didn't understand that what he meant is that Asiatic people doesn't know how to write, but Mongol do know how to write. So it's once again a misuse of the words, or a use understand by French people that have disconnect the words with the nation it's supposed to represent. And we have to always recall that in the beginning, it's supposed to represent a civilization, a nation, peoples, and not a simple idea of idiotic or violence. So that's my daily encounter with the words.
Wow, so daily is incredible, isn't it? Didn't expect that to hear from yourself, or especially because sometimes in some cultures, people who might not be as educated use the word as an insult. But in Quebec, in Montreal, it seems like even the comedians and the TV presenters or journals and magazines seem to use it as normal words,
Exactly. For example, I won't say his name here, but someone wrote an article that had been published in Journal de Montréal, which is one of the biggest journal in the French Canadian community. And he write La Brigade des Mongols, meaning the bunch of Mongol. And he was talking about students are too radical in the campus. But he used the word Brigade des Mongols, or bunch of Mongol, as a normal expression, not understanding or not meeting the link between the fact that Brigade of Mongol also mean those people, and those people are not radical or not violent or not troublesome in nature.
Yeah, that's incredible that it's published. So there are editors who are checking this before getting published as well, and they are not picking this up as actually really, I guess I will say incredible, but in really, I'm shocked in some way, because Canada is one of the most developed countries in the world, most, educated in the world, some of the, most educated countries, really. So we would look up to Canada or France in French-speaking communities to see that actually the words in their vocabulary means what the original and authentic meaning, what they're saying is actually stemmed from, as we discussed earlier before we recorded the interview, is from race science and its colonialism and a different history. And still 200 years later, we're in the same boat. And don't you think it's time to lose it and use it in the right and authentic context, right?
It's time to expand our understandings of the words and of what Mongols is, because we've been so much we develop our thought so much in the way that it's normal to perceive Mongol that way, that it's going to be hard to come back from it. But with work, we're gonna make it happen. But for an example, I remember when I was a kid, I watched a movie, Walt Disney movie, Mulan. Everybody watched that movie. And in that movie, the Chinese are depicted as a wonderful civilization, all of color, all of potential. And the Unus, called Un in French, which is the ancestor of the Mongol tribe, are depicted as gray skin and animal-like face. And we all catch that depiction as normal depiction. What is north of the Great Wall is animal, barbarous, chaotic, dangerous, against civilization. And what is south of it is civilization. What the West love about Asia is what is depicted south of the wall. And what is north of the wall is what the Western doesn't like about Asia. We all normalize that kind of thought through our life where we grow up. And then come the words Mongol that we use as an insult. So we normalize that also. And when you try to make people acknowledge that it's a construct of how we see Mongol past, and it's even more than a construct, because it's so normalized that we forgot that is a construct about Mongol people. So it's a lot of job to do to actually make them remember that the words first of all, design people, and those people have nothing negative or pejorative in itself. So yeah.
Great point. Like Wilnesh said, this is really heartbreaking to hear that you hear it on a daily basis. And I'm sure like in all circumstances, social, academic circumstances, professional settings, and that's quite disappointing to hear. What's the reaction of people when you point it out, when you call them up on it and say, hey, this is not the right way to say, or when you invite people to stop using it in that context, what's the reaction?
It's quite strange because there's so much public debate about so much words in the few last years that a lot of people are just kind of fed up, and they came to the conclusion you want to put another words in the debate, and they don't want other words to be debated. They're already tired of the previous debate. But it's not exactly what I try to do. I don't try to bend the words. I don't try to shame the people that use the word. I just say, hey, it's supposed to design people. It's supposed to design a civilization. And with the literacy example, I actually took a book in Mongol and I showed to him it's Mongol language. It exists and people know how to read it. And we turn out as a funny moment, and I do think it's through funny moment that we're gonna make people understand the situation. Just, hey, it's not, I don't want to shame them. I just want to say there's more about the world, the words Mongol, than the idea that is idiotics. There's a whole world behind the words Mongol to reach. And most of the people, if it's not every people I talked about the word Mongols, they don't know any Mongols. So most of them come to the conclusion that anyway, they won't ever offend anybody because they won't ever talk with Mongol. But in my opinion, it's more than that because it shaped the way we think about the civilization, and the way we speak is reflect in the way we search, the way we do academic words in our universities. So that brings me to the academic worlds, where there's kind of paradigm where the Mongols are by default the violence people. So everything that we liked in Asia has been pushed either in Chinese, Japanese civilization or in old Persian civilization. And everything that the West disliked about Asia has been pushed in the Mongol and at some other point in the Manchu people, because most of the Westerners don't make the difference either between Mongol and Manchu. So all the exotic part of Asia that we like, for example, the sophisticated culture, even Buddhism, or literacy skill, has been kind of set in stone as Chinese civilization, and everything that we disliked about Asia, like violence, war, aggression, it's been depicted as Mongol civilization. And the truth is, the positive is part of every civilization as the negative. And we cannot think of Buddhism without the implication of Mongol. For example, Zanabazar was one of the most influential Buddhist thinker of his time. And even in Buddhist studies, some people doesn't know about him, but they will know about a dozen of Japanese monks, because in their opinion, those monks explain by themselves the whole of Buddhism. And I don't think it's true. Other example, when you want to address the fact that the Mongols have been one of the most literacy nation in the world, this nation did create at least 5, if not more, graphic system, and they developed the FACSPA system, which has been the lingua franca of Asia for at least a century. So we have to acknowledge the Mongols have been invested in the historic past of the whole Asia, and on any level, military, but also religious, and in literacy past too. And the way we think about Mongols and the world's fixed in our thought a paradigm that when we think about Mongol, it's for sure violence, and people around the Mongol, Chinese or Muslim civilization are pushing in Mongols the bad things about their own civilization. Another example, for example, I've read in a text manual at my university that if Muslims are violent, it's because they meet the Mongols. And that's using Mongolia as a scapegoat for everything negative in your culture. Chinese too tend to do it, push the violence of their past in the Mongols. And nobody speak for the Mongols. So nobody said, no, that's not true. The Mongols are becoming the last barbar of the planet because everybody's pushing their bad things of their civilization towards the Asian steppe. And Mongols are, first of all, few around the world. And when they write in the country, it's not being translated. So there's no pushback from the Mongols itself to explain that they're not the barbaric of the planet. So they did right, and we have to acknowledge the right they did, and other people around them did wrong, and we have to acknowledge that the wrong that other people are not from the Mongols. So that's the kind of extrapolation that's sticking to a bad definition or bad understandings of the word Mongols could impact the academic world. So that's why, in my opinion, we have to broaden the sense of the word Mongols to everything it means. So when we think of the words Mongol, we're going to be open to more knowledge, open to the fact that there's way more to think, to learn, and to teach about the civilization than the war and the violence. And if I could continue, the fact that we understand Mongols that way push academics to accept a lot of false position that for any other culture would be for sure questioned. For example, when we read about the source of the Mongol campaign in the time of the empire, the Muslim, the Chinese, and the Japanese that wrote about those war, they all depict Mongol as savage warrior that did horrible things. But when we read the Mongol source, we don't find those things. We actually see quite decent military campaign, for sure violent, but not monstrous. And when we found the source of the general of any nation, Japanese, Chinese, or whatsoever, implied directly in this campaign, we didn't find also those violence. So we could come to the conclusion that the Mongol did not barbarically kill everybody. They for sure invaded the country, but with not much or less violence than any other country. But we tend to accept the idea that they were the most violent warrior ever because we don't question the words Mongols.
I really love that point, how the more we know, the more exposure that there is, and the more voices out there internationally telling our own story, owning our history, right? And saying things as they were and as it is, with sources translated from the original text into all kinds of languages all across the world. You know, there will be a level of enlightening. There needs to be quite a bit of enlightening work to be done, educational work to be done in all sectors, in history, in archaeology, anthropology, like everywhere, right? And when I go to an annual Mongolian Studies conference, it happens in Washington, D.C. every year. If you haven't been, you're definitely welcome. It's organized by Mongolian Cultural Center. And, you know, scholars from all across the world get together and they talk about the latest research, latest accomplishments, latest discoveries in all fields. And it's really fascinating. And what the foreign non-Mongolian scholars agree on is that Mongolian studies is extremely important to the world studies or world history. It plays such a huge foundational role. in how the world, ran in those days. If we don't know Mongol Empire history, we are missing out on world history. So I completely agree with what you said, and there needs to be a lot more Mongolian scholars from Mongolia publishing, research papers and publishing content in various languages. And there definitely should be more people like you as well, taking interest in Mongolia passionately, and also spreading, all the accomplishments, all the contribution we've made to the world. And it's definitely more than just, military campaigns. And just how you said, it's not all about violence. There was there was quite a bit of cultural, scientific exchange, like even in Vatican, there are so many artifacts from Mongol Empire. Paper money was invented in China, but its use was widely spread because of the Mongol Empire. And even when we talk about Silk Road, the trade route and everything, it was the most successful during Mongol Empire, because we managed it and we protected the traders to make sure that there was like proper professional trade going on across the nation. So we've contributed quite a bit to world development and investment and history. And the world needs to know our story for sure.
Completely agree. And just take a moment to talk about the Silk Road. I've read an article not long ago about something called Silk Road civilization, and how the Silk Road did shape the whole of Asia and even of Europe. But the article kind of make no quite statements that there was people involved in the civilization. It was just not just something that exists in itself, and those people that make it happen were never quite questioned in the article. And like, for example, come back to Buddhism. Buddhism wouldn't be what it is today without the Silk Road. It spent its way through the heart of Asia, and it brings some element from even the Mediterranean world, for example, art and even some gods, did reach the Buddhist civilization through the Silk Road. So if you want to understand Buddhism today, you need the Silk Road. And the Silk Road doesn't exist in itself. Those were people, and most of those people were Mongols. They organized part of it, and even in the part where they were not the actual people organizing the step of the road, they were still involved in it. So we don't understand Buddhism without Silk Road and Mongol on it. We don't understand just the language. Like, for example, the Turco-Mongol language family is the biggest linguistic family on the map. And it exists because the Mongol, they walk the planet. So they bring the language everywhere, and they influence every language on the planet. For example, in French, we say hard or harder. It's also a word that become to be involved with violence, because Mongol, But the word is now part of French language. We say une horde to speaking about a bunch of people. So they influence the language, even the French language. So they are everywhere. You don't understand the world history without the Mongol. So once again, we agree.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really fascinating, isn't it, when we study history and what happened. And as you say, every empire, every country has good and bad sides, and we need to have the balance. It can't be all negative, So as Adza said, also we can tell our own story, and especially nowadays with the social media and the internet, and Mongolians and Mongols can speak different languages. Now they can understand and hear different contexts, so Mongol identity works in social, educational, medical, and press and film and media areas. So we are looking at how the word Mongol is being used, and we also raise awareness on the positive meaning, the culture of Mongols, you know, through language and art and, you know, books and films as well. So we have like a film screening and things like that. So it's good. I mean, we have over 30 people in our organization and all volunteers. And yeah, it's good to have people who want to make change on board. And we are very glad that we found you. And you know, it's good to have you on board, and we would love to work with you if you're happy to work with us, you know.
Of course.
Thank you, and to make a social change as well, especially in your hometown, city, place, because you can understand the culture and you can advise us in different ways as well. That would be fantastic. Thank you. Adaya.
Oh, I just wanted to pivot our attention a little bit to the Human Rights Day that we're broadcasting this conversation. We talked about the importance of Mongols, you know, in world history, and how much we've contributed to, you know, what we have today, and also how about the importance of, like, you know, academic ethics, you know, how we should balance our research, balance our narrative, and also have, you know, the proper representation, even in research and academic world. I would like to get your thoughts on human rights side, especially in French-speaking countries like Canada or France. Many children are affected by it. As you said, it's used by people of all ages everywhere, and you said every day. So it's quite a traumatic experience for Mongol children around in those countries. And we think it's a pretty serious human rights violation that these children are exposed to such language on a daily basis. What is your opinion on that, on the misuse of the word Mongol in relation to human rights?
I've been told that some Mongol are not feeling free or too ashamed to identify themselves as Mongol, so they're going to silence their identity in public. I don't know young Mongol in Montreal, because there's not a lot of Mongol of the diaspora in Montreal. And those that I know are actual adults. So I don't know what it is to grow up in a world where you're taught that who you are is supposed to be understood as idiotic or violent. But for sure, nobody should have to silence who he is, because the world we live in doesn't understand who he is. So there's an ethic part, a job to do, that we have to do about the words, so people could say with some pride that they are Mongols, because there's pride in being Mongols for sure. And the way we use the words could avoid those people to feel the pride they allowed and should feel about being Mongols. So for sure, there's a lot of job to do in the ethical part to make sure that nobody will ever be ashamed to be Mongols.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Nobody should be ashamed of, you know, introducing themselves, describing themselves, who they are. It's not about being politically correct. It's about treating each other with dignity. It's a human rights, you know, basic human rights, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. On Human Rights Day, we are ending our interview on human rights topic. Is there anything else you would like to add, Jérémy?
No, we speak about everything I have to say.
Okay, then in that case, that's great. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and sharing your views and also sharing our voice with the world, because today is important day on Human Rights Day, and we feel as fellow human beings, we are supporting each other, supporting human rights, and have a happy Human Rights Day. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Enjoy International Human Rights Day. Our next interview will be in Mongolian language, Jérémy. Start learning.
I will.